You know how to find Trenton anymore? Love that. Good morning, everybody. Chris, you good? All right. Hey, greetings, everybody, and thank you again on short notice, as many of you did last night, for joining us today at the Aberdeen-Matawan train station. Normally, I'd start a press conference like this one by saying good morning, but for families and commuters here in Monmouth County and frankly all across New Jersey, this morning is anything but a good morning. Their days are off to an unnecessarily difficult start. We're now roughly 10 hours into New Jersey's first rail strike in decades. And I want to make sure we get one thing straight up front. It did not have to come to this. Here with me this morning, as he was last night, is the outstanding president and CEO of NJ Transit, Chris Calori. He and his team, many of whom are here with us this morning, along with our entire administration, again, many of them represented this morning, have been working around the clock, frankly, for months to avoid the strike. And now they are continuing to work around the clock to rearrange our state's entire transportation system so it can, to the best of our abilities, meet the needs of New Jerseyans. And I will ask Chris to elaborate on those details in just a few minutes. At this moment, our single highest priority, in addition to making the system work, just as it has been for the past several months, is reaching a fair and affordable deal as soon as humanly possible. A deal that provides NJ Transit's employees, including our locomotive engineers, the wages and benefits they deserve, without being forced to raise costs on riders, commuters, and taxpayers. As I said last night, here in New Jersey, we are proud to be the quintessential organized labor state. As Chris will attest to, 14 of the 15 unions with which NJ Transit engages are in complete harmony. NJ Transit's employees are the backbone of our public transit system. But the workers who depend on NJ Transit are the backbone of our entire economy. They deserve a public transit system that is reliable and affordable, period. So in our efforts to balance fairness on the one hand with affordability on the other, back in March, Chris and the BLETS representatives shook hands on a contract that would pay engineers roughly the same hourly wage, literally give or take 10 cents per hour, as engineers with the Long Island Railroad. In other words, it would have given their members almost exactly what they have asked for, being paid the same wage as engineers at other transit systems in our region. And crucially, that contract would have provided our engineers their hard-earned raises without blowing up NJ Transit's budget. At the time, BLET's General Chairman Thomas Haas called the contract that was agreed upon, and I quote him, fair and fiscally responsible, end of quote. But now, just a couple of months later, a small handful of locomotive engineers have walked off the job and shut down our entire transit system. I think Chris will correct me if I've got the math wrong, that we're talking just under 400 engineers in a total workforce of about 12,000. It is frankly a mess of their own making, and it is a slap in the face of every commuter and worker who relies on NJ Transit. But we're not here this morning to point fingers. We are here to demonstrate that our administration remains ready to get NJ Transit back to full speed and to provide the BLETS members their hard-earned raises. Of course, no deal under these circumstances, or probably any other, is ever going to be perfect. The fact is, mass transit systems across the country face a sobering fiscal reality, in part due to threats to federal funding, and those threats and those realities cannot be ignored. I mentioned last night SEPTA across the Delaware River threatening to cut services by 45% and at the same time increase fares by 20%. That will not ever be the case here in New Jersey. And putting NJ Transit on stable fiscal footing as we have worked relentlessly to do for the past now 7.5 years, requires tough calls and compromises from all of us, lawmakers, workers, employers, businesses, and especially our commuters and taxpayers. Witness last year's painful corporate transit fee. And I might add, that is in sharp contrast. We dealt within the four walls of New Jersey with a very challenging fiscal reality that, again, is not unique to New Jersey, but we're also not immune, as in contrast to the MTA's answer, which is to rip off New Jersey commuters going into Manhattan. We chose to solve that challenge within our four walls, and we will this one as well. But I, for one, refuse to pass the buck or increase taxes on hard-working New Jerseyans for the same or even more likely reduced service. That's not going to happen. That is untenable. And the truth is, we can deliver a fair contract to every New Jersey Transit employee without abandoning our hardworking neighbors. And let me be clear, this is also about reaching a solution that sets the next administration up for success. The contract being negotiated at this moment is about the long-term future of NJ Transit well after I leave office. Literally a tiny fraction of any deal that we reach will impact our remaining 8 months. And the easy play for Chris and for me is to just cave, fold, and kick this thing down the road. And we're not doing that. So we're holding the line for the next governor and the next administration so they do not inherit a NJ Transit that is on the brink of fiscal collapse, but is in fact in a strong state of health. That is what it means to fix NJ Transit, leaving the agency in better shape in every respect, but especially in fiscal terms, than when we entered office. I was asked last night if I still stuck by my statement, we'll fix NJ Transit if it kills me. And the fact of the matter is, I apologize, facts matter here. That's exactly what we've been doing for the past 7+ years, and especially over the past 5 or 6 months since Chris has been at the helm. The stance that we're taking to get a fair deal for our workers and not blow up NJ Transit's finances is exactly a central tenet in fixing NJ Transit. If you look at our on-time performance, I should have put an asterisk on my commitment, but for the fact of what Amtrak is up to. If you look at on-time performance over the past 16 months, especially on the recent months on the non-Amtrak lines, it's mid to high 90%. Even on the Amtrak lines, it is regularly in the mid to upper 80%. We mentioned last night, I think the board approved 250 new double-level, two-level rail cars this week. That brings the total to 400. We'll have an entirely new fleet when all of that comes into fruition. We'll have a new locomotive fleet. I think you guys approved the board 12 this week, 12 new locomotives. We've got new train stations in Lyndhurst, Elizabeth. The Portal North Bridge is nearing completion. Many other stations. The facts, I apologize, let's not let the facts get in the way. We've had bumps in the road. Last summer, particularly last June, was unacceptable. This is a bump in the road. Chris will walk you through how we're dealing with it. But the trajectory is undeniable. And again, I wish Amtrak could punch at their weight, and the trajectory would be even more compelling. So back to today, what the people of New Jersey need right now is for the members of the BLET to step up and meet their obligations to the public. Let's end this strike, as we just said to a couple of their good members a few minutes ago. Our doors are open. We are ready to restart negotiations literally this second. But we need the BLET to come back to the negotiating table in good faith. Our doors are open. They will remain open. I thank you for coming out on short notice. And with that, please help me welcome the President and CEO of NJ Transit, Chris Calori. Chris?
Governor, thank you for your continued leadership. And I know this moment of a strike is what any one of us wanted to see. But that is where we find ourselves. But I want to sort of frame today's discussion picking up on where the governor left off on a couple of points. One, when the strike went into effect last night at 12:01, we worked very methodically to put the railroad to bed, use the railroad language, to make sure every train car that we had safely got to its destination. Customers were let out, and the train cars were parked in yards where they're supposed to be. This morning, we also ensured not only that our customers had real-time information by having people at train stations who can answer the questions of customers, but to also make sure our bus lines that are now fully operational are picking up passengers there where they need to be on time and move them efficiently. There are a couple of lines where we have seen some overcrowding, not to a point where people have been standing in lines, but we have been able to resource those lines properly to make sure, again, we handle the volume that is out there. That is important because this goes to a bit of what the governor talked about. He said from the very beginning, he hopes for the best, but what? That we're planning for the worst. That is what we're doing, and we intend to do it. Our promise to our customers is we understand this is not where you want it to be either, but my job at the governor's direction is to make sure we solve problems as they appear. That is my commitment, and we will do that today, we'll do that tonight, we'll do that every day the union decides to be on strike. That is our commitment. Second, I want to pivot to this issue the governor talked about, which is very, very important, and let me try to contextualize it this way. Just a couple of weeks ago, a national newspaper said that transit agencies around the country are in a financial death spiral. These are their words. It was in the headline. What does that mean? Almost every transit agency in this region, you don't even have to go far away to the West Coast, but you can. What you'll find uniformly is every transit agency, not just SEPTA, but MTA. MTA has a $400 million deficit this year and next year. SEPTA, the governor mentioned, have massive financial problems because of some of these bad practices that go back years, if not decades. We, for the first time in 45 years, thanks to the governor and the legislature, first time in 45 years, we are finally on stable financial footing. That has never happened before. Just when we are in a position to say we have put this agency on a course towards fiscal stability, we now are confronted with this existential problem, which is what? Which is the unions are saying, give us a fair deal, that sounds about right, no matter what the cost. Well, that second part is where we're all hung up on. This is not about not giving them a fair wage. It's about how do you do it in a fiscally responsible manner that doesn't bankrupt New Jersey Transit and puts it on a debt spiral like every other mass transit agency. That's the governor's only objective, and that's my only objective. It would be politically expedient, easy almost, for us to say, let somebody else handle the problem. But he made the hard decision in this budget, and the budgets, previous budgets, to say we're not doing what other folks have done. That's what this is all about. We, the governor and I, just had a chance to meet with the locomotive engineers who are out there just a few minutes ago. They were gracious to us. You know what they said to us? They want to get back to work. That's great. We want them to get back to work too. But we said to them, we want to get back to the work, but we want to make sure you continue to work, because what's the point in giving you a pay raise if a couple of years from now your job is not going to exist? That's sort of what we're talking about in the most plain and simple terms. So we are committed, and I want to say this to you. When the governor gave me this opportunity, which is a privilege, about 5 months ago, the first call I made was to Tommy Haas, the chairman of the BLET. I called him. And I called him because I knew how important this issue is for us to address and fix, because they've been fighting for this for no less than 5 years. Governor Murphy said to me, your first priority is to get this done. So we did it. And in fact, we got a deal done. They voted it down, their choice. But what I'm saying to you is, this doesn't have to be rocket science. We can get there. We can get a deal done. We can get a deal done that is fair to them and fiscally responsible to us. That's all we're trying to do. I will never leave the negotiating table. I've never left the negotiating table. In fact, when we ended last night, we ended on a very conciliatory note, despite what's being said out there, that we're going to get back together when we have something to put across each other, and I'm waiting for them to do just that. So I want you to know we are going to handle the strike from our standpoint very methodically, calmly, and address the problems as they come up. At the same time, at the governor's very deep involvement in these negotiations, we're going to get to a solution that is fair and fiscally responsible. That is the game plan. There's nothing else to it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Chris. Just to add to Chris's point, remember, and Chris went through this last night, we not only have buses, we have the path, we have ferries, we have light rail, all of which are being deployed aggressively. Secondly, and Chris literally left the press conference last night with a bunch of his colleagues and went out to MetLife. I think it's fair to say both the incoming and outbound traffic at the Shakira concert last night went really well. We're hoping for a similar experience tonight. She's got Pitbull with her tonight, for those of you watching out there, otherwise known as Armando. And just one question for you. You mentioned the National Board last night and Sunday morning. Any color on that before we take questions?
Thank you, Governor. Sorry. In last Monday, the National Mediation Board asked us to come to Washington, the both parties, and to make sure we do a meeting. And we did. And that sort of kicked off a whole round of negotiations that went till late last night. They've now asked us to come back again on Sunday. We're going to do just that to make sure we do it. But I just want to be clear, I don't have to wait till Sunday. I actually saw Mark Wallace, the president of the BLAD, this morning at Penn Station. He was walking and I was walking, and we spent a few seconds talking, very, very polite, very normal conversation about how we're going to try to solve this problem together. So I want to convey this message that there isn't this acrimony that somehow gets projected in the media. When we are in the room together, we understand our mission, and I'm telling you right now, I am fully committed at Governor Murphy's direction to get this deal done, but it has to be fair to them, but it has to be fiscally responsible.
Well said. One other question. I'm doing the first two questions here. You can channel them through me. Any comment about other unions within NJ Transit in terms of their posture and profile today, if you don't mind?
I'll say that we have said to any union member at New Jersey Transit, if they want to come to work, we welcome them to come to work, and they have been coming to work, and they are doing the stuff they're supposed to be doing, and that shows a sense of their commitment to New Jersey Transit's mission. And I think that should be applauded. This isn't something to be vilified for, and we appreciate it and will continue to work. And I want to emphasize what the governor said. The men outside in orange shirts, not transit men, but the other men, and the locomotive engineers, want to get back to work, and we want them to get back to work. That is the entire mission here, because ultimately we want the 350,000 daily riders to be able to use the mass transit system that they rely on.
Like any labor action like this, not only is it a real burden and challenge for our commuters, it ultimately is a burden and challenge for those guys out there and their families. So it's in all of our interests to get to a resolution here, and we are wide open for business to do that. Again, it's got to meet those two objectives: fair to them and fiscally responsible for us. We believe that a deal is there, and God willing, that will come to fruition. With that, we'll take a couple of quick questions. Brenda? It is Brenda. I'll let Chris address that. It's a very good question, and we did hit it last night, but we should hit it again this morning. The difference between getting this right and wrong, I mentioned this in passing last night, is a difference between single-digit to low double-digit millions of dollars on the one hand versus 9-digit millions of dollars on the other hand. The former is within our purview, within Chris's and my purview to be able to handle. The latter is in the category of blowing up our fiscal reality at NJ Transit, which we cannot allow to happen. Chris, do you mind addressing?
Yes, sir. I think, let me try to frame it this way. These are incredibly complex agreements, right? If the structure of the agreement is focused on locomotive engineers and things that they want to change in work rules and they want to give back in work rule savings, then it becomes a locomotive engineer contract. If it looks and feels like it's anything other than that, somebody asked me, are these so-called Me Too clauses consistent in every union contract? The answer is yes. So this isn't just a unique thing for New Jersey Transit. So all we're trying to do is solve for this very important issue of wages that the union has asked for, but in the foundation that the governor talked about, fair and fiscally responsible, is grounded in the structure of the contract as well, because we have to make sure all the concessions we're asking for are locomotive engineer concessions, and all the changes we're producing that'll give them this increase are locomotive specific wage increases, if that makes sense.
Some Me Too questions as well. So, I'm curious, where is the Me Too?
By the way, we got to get a different title for this category here. Just to want to get that off my chest here.
But is this in current railway contracts? Is it the Federal Railway Act or someplace else? And maybe you can walk us through the process. How are other unions entitled to it? Do they just come in and say they got it, we got it, or do you have to wait until they reopen their next contract negotiation?
I'm going to hand this one to Chris.
Yes, sir. If done incorrectly, or done correctly, it doesn't matter, forget intent for 1 second. Every union, regardless, by the way, of New Jersey Transit or not, this happens at the Turnpike, this happens in firemen, this happens in police, this happens in teachers. In general, that's my understanding. There is what is called a side letter that basically informs a process by which it triggers this clause. And what I am suggesting is, and it is not, think about it from a union's perspective and why they would need a letter like that. If they were first in the door and they made a deal, and a few months later, somebody else comes in the door and makes another deal that looks and feels a lot richer for doing basically the same things that these folks are doing, it's meant to protect them. So think about it that way. So it was meant to bring some level of equity, fairness, and parity for going first, if you will. So all we're saying is if our intent is to solve this union's very specific sort of ask, we've said to them, let's put stuff on the table, concessions, if you will, that are very specific to you, and let's change work rules that are very specific to you. So forget all the other unions. We are focused on this union. That's where the governor's point about this could be in the multi-million-dollar from a wage raise. So they're not wrong about that. But what you can't do is sort of be a little careless, because all you care about is getting to a number, which is what the union's position is at the moment, and not worrying about what the consequences could be for the state in the out years, which is what we can't do. It's that straightforward.
And by the way, I just repeat, the easy play for this guy and myself is to just sign up for something and not worry about what's going to happen after January 20th of next year. We're not going to do that. We know the shape of this system that we inherited. We will not do that to the next administration. Please. Yeah. Not a lot, by the way, which is good.
So in South Orange and in Central Jersey, when I say bus lines, I'm talking about a couple of buses doing a couple of periods during the morning. But what we were able to do is resource them to make sure the people who are there are handled and put on the buses. But the most important thing you need to know is there were no lines waiting to get on the bus. It was just we have very good technology on our buses where we're able to measure what's going on regular demand versus current demand and be able to sort of handle our demand management of the fleet, if you will. No, look, I mean, the governor, with his approval, we just made a deal with the 5,500 members of the bus union last week, and they stuck with pattern, and they are very, very happy, so we have a tentative agreement with them.
I don't think we're aware of anybody outside of the engineers not showing up today. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, broadly.
Broadly speaking, at least. Please.
On the bus line, what are those looking like? And do you think that, it being Friday, how much more is it, like, the demand going to look like on Monday?
Let me start with the last part, and then Chris give you the details. Friday is clearly the easiest weekday of the 5, notwithstanding MetLife's activities, which is makes it a significant, both last night and tonight, a significant lift. We're very much well aware of that. Frankly, if this had to happen, having it happen at 12:01 on Friday, I think it's fair to say, Chris, gives you and your colleagues a chance to suss out what's working, what's not working, where we need to plus up resources, et cetera, on a day that will be lighter than Monday for sure. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday continue to be our big commute days. Any other color you want to throw?
And let me answer it this way. I think some bus lines are crowded even during regular non-strike days, right? So what I'm suggesting to you is when we identified a few instances on one or two of our bus lines, we were able to adapt very quickly to solve for that problem, which is sort of the central theme of how we're managing the strike, which is very calmly, methodically identify a problem and solve for it when it happens, which is how good organizations do business.
There is no, I have to say, and this is a big shout out to Chris and his team, there's no sense of panic. This is a professional operation. We did not want to see this day come, but they were prepared for it. And I have to say I'm incredibly impressed by their efforts so far. I think I can answer for Chris and his team to say we're going to war game what happened this morning and this afternoon, probably tonight as well, because we have I hope it doesn't get out that far, but we got Beyonce coming in for 5 nights beginning next week. I'm sure there'll be lessons learned that will be applied. Please. I'll let Chris, I didn't see Sean's comment, by the way. Sean's a Boston boy, bless his heart. Didn't these guys leave the Teamsters? Yeah. The New Jersey guys. Okay, that's a separate, have to ask Sean what his thoughts are on that. The tone in the room is exactly what you would expect it would be. Chris will give you color, but this is a professional, the fact that we're not agreeing doesn't mean that we're throwing chairs at each other. To the contrary, we just are at an impasse. You should probably add to that.
Yeah, look, I've now met with the general chairman, I don't know, over the 120 days I've been in this job, maybe like 10 of those 120 days, 10 weeks out of those 120 days, one way or the other. And I've gotten to know the new president, national president. Look, what I'm trying to convey is I understand that people have to say certain things in the public. I respect that. But what I'm saying to you is my approach always has been to try and sort of understand their position and try to get to a solution. And I think ultimately that is the only objective. So I like to think I have a relatively thick skin, so they can call me whatever they want, but in the end, the question is, do they want a deal or not? I want it. Do they want it?
This is the nature of the beast. If you looked at what folks across the aisle would have say about me, and then if you were to look at our private deliberations and negotiations, it's it's life. It's life. We all know that that's the way it works. Couple other quickies. Where are you? Where are you?
I'm back here.
Hi.
Good morning.
Did we not reserve you a seat or what?
No, I
Okay.
yes, good morning.
Yeah, I'll let Chris respond to the details, but we've been at that table in good faith, and we've said, including last night at Newark Penn, we reiterated this morning, we're here. We're open for business. We want to get this solved. So this notion of walking away is not accurate. You also have to accept when you think there's an impasse that can't be bridged. And I think it's fair to say, Chris, we were a lot further along on the fairness to them parameter than we were with something that we could accept in terms of fiscal responsibility. And that is a deal breaker for us. I wish it weren't, but it is.
I'll just say, there hasn't been anyone in their relationship with New Jersey Transit who's been more willing to negotiate than me. In fact, I don't need to just say it. The proof is in the pudding. I've already done it once. I was the first guy to reach out to them first time around. I was the first guy to reach out to them second time. I think the only reason why we came to the decision we did together, I might add, because I ended the meeting by saying the follows. You have put forward a proposal that seems fair to you, but it doesn't solve our fundamental issue of fiscal responsibleness. Here's our counter. To which they said, well, that doesn't meet what we think is right. And I said, why don't we do this? You take time to think about it, we'll take time to think about it, and then we'll continue talking to reach a solution. And that's when the National Mediation Board, which was present the entire time, for all 3 days, said, why don't we all gather on Sunday? So that doesn't sound to me like I left in a huff and a puff. It just sounds like doing what reasonable people do after almost 11 hours of negotiating, saying you're at a position that's not tenable to us. You still don't seem to agree with where we are, but we are making progress, and we'll get there. Well, that's the beauty about these negotiations, right? Just because they say it and just because I say it doesn't mean there's not a deal in there. This is not, I'm sorry, I know this is complex, but the job is complex, but the outcome doesn't have to be. It's as simple as what the governor laid out. These two principles and the structure that we're talking about together. By the way, this doesn't mean they have to accept all our ideas or they have to accept all our ideas. We've had 3 days of extraordinarily productive discussions. And I'll say this to you. If you sort of look at this contract as a 100% deal, we're 95% there. So this isn't, the reason I continue to be optimistic that we can get there is this is about solving for their problem and our need. That's it. And we'll get there.
Do one or two more, please.
You mentioned essential
Said it last night as well, yes.
the union knows that
Sure, I think Chris will respond to it, but please.
Sure. Look, let me not debate the numbers they put on the table and I put on the table. Let me just sort of answer it maybe a little bit broadly, okay? They started this discussion by saying we're not getting paid enough. Fair point. And they said we're making $10 less than everybody else in this region. Fair enough. So when those are the sort of two principal issues, and you solve for it, then doesn't matter whether it is a metric that holds today or tomorrow morning. They wanted a number that I thought, got very close to in our negotiations, their number. And I still think we can get there. So I could, but I'm not going to, but I'll give you one example. Did you know the Metro North engineer, a trainee, takes 8 years to make the salary that a New Jersey Transit engineer makes in 2 years? Why is that? Because it takes a trainee at Metro North to go through what is called a progressive wage for 8 years. Not so at New Jersey Transit. Do you know why? Because the day they're hired, they train for the number of years, just 2 roughly. At the end of 2 years, they make full wage. Full wage. So there is no progression. So I could say, but I don't say it at the table, but I wanted to give you an example. I could say, well, that's not fair. So why are you demanding a wage in year 2 that is higher than what Metro North makes until year 8? I don't do it. You know why? Because it is not a productive point. We need to focus on what is they're trying to achieve and what we have to achieve. That's it. That's how you get to a deal. And I'm telling you, as long as we're focused on those 2 principles, we can get there.
I think we're going to fold the tent real quick. I have the same reaction as I had with Mayor Baraka, even more so in this case, because as a member of Congress, unless our lawyers tell me I've got my constitutional facts wrong, they have an absolute right to inspect any facility like that. So I've seen the same rumors. I've got no comment on the specifics, but LaMonica, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Rob Menendez have absolute rights to inspect those facilities. And if that goes ahead, I think it's just as I said about Ras Baraka, outrageous. Thank you all. Stay tuned.